Hello ladies and gents, in this video we will explore a control named ObjectListItem. Now let's say we want to display more fields for our products, and since StandardListItem doesn't have many fields, we need to switch to a more powerful one, and we will use one named ObjectListItem. Now let's explore what we can use. First of all, we have the title attribute, just like the standard list item. So let's begin with that. Let's call it MacBook Air, for example. And another attribute we can use with the object list item that's not available for the standard list item is called number. And let's display $9.99 as the price here. And another attribute we have is number unit for the unit of our number, and let's say euro for now. Let's save it and check how it looks. Okay, it looks quite similar, but now we have a number here in bold and a slightly larger font size, and right under it we see our unit. And let's see what else we can have with object list item. Let's actually check the API reference and see what we have available there. Let's search for object list item in the mobile library. And we have already added a few properties. So let's go to aggregations, see what we have. So there is one named attributes. And it says it has to be of type object attribute and cardinality of 0 to n. So we can have multiple. Let's see what it looks like. Let's copy it. And since it's an aggregation, we implement it in between the object list item tags as a child. And let's copy the type object attribute. And since it has a cardinality of 0 to n, we can have multiple. I will make these self-closing ones, and let's have two. And let's check what properties this object attribute has. And if we scroll down, we can see two main ones, title and text. Let's use those. So let's say title, category, and text electronics for this one. And for the second one, let's say title equals release date and text equals something like the standard date. If we save and go back to our app, we now see two attributes with a label or a title and a value. We have the category and release date. And let's see what else we have available. So we go back to object list item aggregations, and we see first status, for example, as well as a second status and markers. Let's try this first status aggregation and see what it looks like. So after our attributes aggregation, we add first status. And the type has to be object status, so let's also copy that. And we create a new object status. Let's see what we need to provide as properties. And we have some more here. We are going to use the text attribute and the state attribute. So let's go back. As the text, let's say available. Let's say we want to display the availability here. And the next one was called state. And this one is also predefined. So if we check, it's a string, but the values we can use come from this value state object. So if we check the possible values we can use, under this namespace, we have error, information, none, success, and warning. Since we said available, I will use success. So it will be displayed in green and can be a self-closing one. Let's save and check. Okay, everything looks nice. Our status is formatted accordingly. It's green. We have our number and attributes and everything. Next, what I want to do is I want to add more input fields here. When we press on create new product, we can create new object list items programmatically. So let's get back to our code and start creating our inputs. But first I'm going to wrap all our inputs into a control named VBox, which is like a vertical flex box. So everything inside will be positioned in a vertical manner. And first let's move our input inside the VBox. And next I want to create a category combo box so we can select one. And the control we are going to use for that is named combo box. And again, we have to give it an ID so we can access it from our controller. Let's name it ID category. And let's also give it a placeholder so it doesn't look empty. We need to know what we are selecting. And let's use the i18 and file and simply call it category. And before we forget, let's create it. And the combo box has an aggregation named items. It's the default one actually. Let's check quickly. It's combo box. We go to aggregations. Items is the default one, and the control we have to use is named SAP UI core item. So this is not inside the mobile library, it's under the core library. So we go back and we first have to create a namespace for the core library. Let's create one quickly. Let's name it core as well. And the library is SAP UI core. Now we can use it to create items. And let's quickly check which properties we have for it. The ones we are going to use are key and text. Key, both strings and text. And I'm going to leave the first one empty because I like to have an empty one at the top. And let's create 3 more. Keys 0, 1, and 2. Text first one, let's say food. Second, beverages. And the last one, electronics. Let's save and check our application quickly. Okay, we can see a new combo box with a category placeholder, and we have all our 3 categories as well as with an empty one. Now let's continue. Next, I'd like to add another input for the price. So we say input, and we again begin with an ID. Let's say ID price. Next, the placeholder, and again from the i18 file, let's simply call it price. Okay. And for the input control, we also have another property named the type. And as you can see, we have several available like email, password, text, URL, etc. Text is the default one, but we are going to use number since it's going to be the price. And next I would like to have 2 more fields, 2 dates, one for the release date and one for discontinued date. And for the dates we have a special control named date picker. Let's make it a self-closing one as well. And as always, we give it an ID. Let's say ID release date, a placeholder, again from the i18 and release date. We create it before we forget. And let's create another one for the discontinued date. Okay, now we have our inputs ready. Let's check how it looks. Nice, some of them are too long, but don't worry, we will fix it in the next video. And we have our date picker and it looks something like this. Now the next step is to create our items programmatically when we click on create new button. So let's get on with it. We go to our controller. And here we need to get all the other values that we added inputs for. Let's start with, what was the first one? I think it was category. So let's say const as category equals. I will just copy this part. And the ID of our control was category, ID category. And actually I'm going to rename this to O category as an object, because I just want to get the selected item via this method we have access to, which is named get selected item for the combo box control. And I'm going to later on extract the text value from it. Next, I believe we have price. Let's see. Yes. So we say const as price equals, again, let's use this method to access our control via its ID. And we simply say get value. And the next two are our dates. So we say const as release date. I will again copy this. We get the ID. And the method for the date picker is called get date value instead of get value. And let's duplicate this. And as discontinued date equals this dot get value. Okay, now we just need to add all these to our object list item. We still have the standard list item here, so let's update that to use the object list item instead. And title we can just leave as is. The next was, let's see, from our XML, we have the number. So we say number, which is equal to s price. And we have the number unit right after, and I'm going to hard code it to euro for now. Then we have the attributes aggregation. So we say attributes, and since it has a cardinality of 0 to n, it's going to be an array. And under attributes, remember we have the object attribute controls. So we need to create two controls, but first we have to import them, of course. So we import them from the M library, object attribute, and we create a new one with the new keyword. And let's see what we had. First one was titled category, and the text was electronics. So we can hardcode the title to category. But the text should come from the selected category here. So we already have the selected item named our category. And these item controls have a method named getText. And we create another object attribute. Let me actually duplicate this one. and the title for that is release date, and the text will now come from our release date date picker. So I copy this, and the only thing left is the status here. And the idea is to set it to available if the discontinued date is bigger than the current date, and set it to unavailable if the discontinued date is less than or equal to the current date. And how we are going to do is, first let's create the aggregation first status. And this is not going to be an array because it's 0 to 1. And we need to create an object status as a child. So let's also import that. And also add it to our callback function. And we say new object status. And the properties we have are text and state, but we have to determine this ourselves if it's available or not. So what I'm going to do is I will create two methods, two internal methods for our controller. The first one I will name get availability text. And the second one I will name get availability state. And let's call the first one to get the text attribute. So we say this, remember it points to our controller, and then our private method. And I'm going to pass in the discontinued date here, which is a JavaScript date object, by the way, that we get from this getDateValue method. And then as for the state, I'm going to use the other method, getAvailablityState. And I will also pass in the discontinued date here. So like I said, the logic is to set it to available if the discontinued date is greater than the current date. So let's name our argument as ODate here. And we use a ternary expression, we return, and first we check if ODate is greater than new date, which is going to return the current date object. Then we return available, else we return unavailable. And as for state, also use ODate, and I will copy this. And this time we have to return not a string but a value state, and remember it was under the core library. So if we check it again, it's named SAP-UI core value state. You see it's an enum, so let's import it as well instead of hard coding the values. Let's replace these with slashes and add it to our callback. So if our product is available, we are going to use the value state success. If not, we are going to use value state error. Okay, now if we have done everything correctly, our app should work. But first let's remove the hard-coded item we have here, the default one, and we can also remove the aggregation completely, and we can now make this a self-closing one. Let's save, check our application. Okay, no errors, no items yet. Let's create our good old MacBook Air. Category is electronics, price $9.99, release date somewhere here, discontinued, it will be discontinued later on, create, and we see all fields available, and the release date looks quite big. This is the default format for JavaScript date objects, but we are going to format this later in a future video. For now, let's create another one. Let's say Dr. Pepper, which is a beverage. It's €1. It was released 2 days ago and it was discontinued yesterday. Makes sense. Now we can see price 1 and it's unavailable, and since it's unavailable, we see the status in the red color. Now let's leave it here for this video, and I hope to see you in the next one when we create a form for our inputs, which would look much better than it looks right now.